good. I know there's good things happening.
I went to the fair for the first time ever last night.
That's the first time ever. And you went there for Ludacris.
Did.
Oh, that's a little different.
No, we walked around a little bit.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. What else? What else is good?
That was my first time ever.
I have my race on Saturday.
Saturday, what time?
Race starts at 8:30 in Hopkins.
Okay.
Yeah.
For all of those that might not know what you're doing, what is this race?
It's a triathlon, but this one is it got chosen to be the national sprint triathlon. So there's gonna be a lot of elite players there, and I'm gonna be taking notes.
No, you're gonna be
You're gonna
competing.
be-
You're not taking notes.
I know my place, okay?
I'm like,
Those guys
No.
those guys hike 29 miles an hour,
How do you,
okay?
how do you take notes when they're all behind you, Chris?
yeah, that's what I was thinking, Rick. Like, come on.
I'm trying to beat my PR, so under an hour and 25 minutes.
So this reminds me of my daughter yesterday, was playing tennis against Blake, and usually private schools are really good at tennis. And so she's like, Mom, please don't come to the match because I'm just gonna get, I'm just not gonna be good. And so the competitiveness in me, so if any kids are at Blake,
I filled out this
you're gonna go in there and you're gonna look across that net and you're gonna crush her. And you're gonna crush every dream she ever had. And she won. She was the only player that won yesterday against Blake. And I'm like, you crushed it. Maybe that's not the right motivation, but she won. So it worked. It was great. It was great. All right, what else? What else is good?
I wanted to give a bucket fill to Derek. You were so helpful yesterday. And, ego aside, I'm 56 years old and it is difficult to be vulnerable. And I'm absolutely loving starting another chapter of my life at this stage. Oh my God, I'm getting teary. But I really want to thank you all. Because the vulnerability has been something that's been very difficult for me because I was in the dental industry. I was the best. I was the West Coast sales trainer. And now after raising all 4 kids, it's back to me. And this is what I've always wanted to do. So if I have questions that might seem a little, just go with it.
All right, what else? What else is good? Beat that, huh? Huh? Come on, something else is good.
The thing to remember is all of us at some point in time were at the spot where we didn't know anything. And it's just, I don't know, to be vulnerable is powerful because that's where you're gonna learn things and be willing to make mistakes. And I do it all the time. I've printed my letters incorrectly and now I have to refold them.
Maddie, Maddie is here. She could probably do that for you. She's just sitting on the couch doing nothing.
We'll talk.
We'll talk. All right. Well, and also the piece of even if you're in the business for a really long time, I mean, the changes that are happening right now, people are relearning a lot of things or learning new things. So, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the business. You can always ask questions and people are here. All right. Anything else? Any other good things happening? Rick.
Sherry and I were asked to have dinner with one of our clients, who's also a contractor, and it's somebody I've looked up to just because it's just massive businesses, across the United States. And we sat down and the first part of it was good, learning about this potential project for us in Arizona. And the second part, he spent 20 minutes basically lecturing me on what I need to do to bring my business to the next level and to change what I'm doing now, which was great. It is the exact same thing that I've heard from my wife and my business partner for a number of years. But it was also good to hear it from somebody else that just kind of put it all together. And so I'm now leveraging everything that I shouldn't be doing. You know, so, there's, getting new people to take over these responsibilities, these things that get in the way of doing the most important part of the business. So it's pretty exciting, and it'll be a good change for Sherry and I, because all the miscellaneous stuff will just fall to the wayside, because other people are gonna take care of it. And he gave us some super creative, great ideas on how to do that and still get the same response from our clients. So it's really
Awesome.
cool. It's really good.
Awesome. Let me know what his name is. I'll send him a bottle of wine. Somebody should tell you and then we'll go from there. Awesome. All right, moving on. Showing time, that's tomorrow. What?
It is tomorrow.
Oh, at 11, is that in person only or in person and Zoom? I mean, will it be able to, is she gonna share a screen? Okay, perfect. So if you don't know how to use some of the reports in Showing Time, they are incredibly useful. They're useful for pricing property. They're useful for buyers to know kind of what's going on in particular neighborhoods and how many showings are happening. And it's incredibly useful when you ask for a price improvement. If they're saying, hey, we don't have any showings, well, you know what's awesome is $20,000 cheaper. There's 8 showings versus 2 showings per listing. So this is a really good class to go to if you don't currently utilize that, or if you don't know how to utilize it.
There's so many more reports than you think. I mean,
Well, there's a ton of reports.
tons of reports and the information is, it's valuable information. I would recommend everyone go to this.
The office will be closed on Monday, for Labor Day. So if there's anything that you need done prior to that, do that on Friday, because no one will be in the office, and unless it is on fire emergency, do not text Heather or I. So we are having a specialty meeting next week, so it's gonna be off-site. We are not gonna be here at the Market Center. We are actually gonna be in Plymouth at a model home. And I have the pleasure of interviewing our very own operating principal, John Butler. So you need to learn all of the fun things about him and how he got to where he is. And then afterwards, we have complimentary photos done. So you can register here to get, what is the time frame from 12 till 2, right?
It's gonna be an hour before and then also 2 hours after. And
Okay.
when you do the QR code, the time slots are there. So you do have to sign up beforehand or you will not have your picture taken. Okay? And then if you want a team.
And I would go in right now if you want slots, because they are filling up very quickly after the email was sent out.
And so if you want a team photo, do a slot for your team. And then if you want an individual photo, that's another slot. So, but all the times are in there. So you can go on and get your new headshot.
Yeah, it'll be really fun. And then we're gonna go over some different things with new construction that Scott is going to talk about with the builder after the interview. So any questions around that?
We go back to the address.
Yeah.
We'll be sending that out too.
And John said that he doesn't like to be prepped on questions, so bring all of your questions right afterwards, right, John?
I've never been prepared for anything, so.
Thank you.
All right, and then we have Leadership Academy on September 10th with Jake Lures. That's gonna be here from 11 to 12:30. We have not had one of those in quite some time, so I know he's got some new things to be teaching in that class. Again, scan the QR code and sign up for that. It'll be a good one.
Just a heads up on that. Jake sent the wrong days. He put his on Wednesdays on all of his emails, so I'll send him a note. But it says his
You do
class.
that. You tell him, I think he doesn't know how to update his Eventbrite is the problem.
That's all, I'll send him a
I
note right
think
now.
that's the issue. 'Cause that's been like that for like a year now. All right, Bold. So yesterday I had a really nice conversation with some of our leaders in the office, whether or not they're gonna be coming to Bold. And, I feel really passionate about this particular training because when I was a new agent, it was incredibly helpful. When I was an agent that had been in the business for 4 or 5 years, it was even more helpful, right? Because we all have different things that happen in our life personally, that affects our business life as well, no matter if we want to say it does or not. And this is not just a course for lead generation and how to move your business forward. It's truly a mindset course. So I would say 70% of the time I get more from Bold in a mindset space than I do in regards to lead generation. Because I end up having like to self-reflect and say, okay, what is really happening in my business and in my life? And usually it's a really fun time when you look in the mirror and you figure out, oh, it's me, right? And we don't do that unless we go to something like this. We just don't. And I don't know, if you don't feel like you're in a place where you are like at your full potential, you should be in this course, like hands down. And I know that there's a lot of people that are kind of balking at it and saying my numbers are up. I know everybody's numbers, guys. So I would recommend people looking at their numbers before we say, hey, my numbers are up, because some of the people I talked to that said that, they actually aren't, right? And in that space, this is where you can just say, okay, let me take a second. Because I know at the end of the year, when we have awards and you aren't where you want to be, it's too late. Too late at that time, right? And it's gonna be too late when you're going into your first quarter of next year. So I know this is like probably a little bit like ho-hum, but I'm not gonna give you the cheerleader speech why you should be there. You should just be there.
Are those Mondays?
They're Wednesdays. So in fact, some of our leadership team is gonna be going, and we're most likely gonna be moving the team meeting during those times to Tuesdays for those sessions, because I think it's that important for us to be there. So on that note, who has already signed up? Okay, Alex, you're actually signed up. And then who is planning on signing up for Bold? At least the first step, raise your hand. Anyone who did not raise their hand, can I ask why? I know who didn't raise their hand. I'm just curious. If you don't want to share, maybe you should be there. That's all. Moving on.
Good job, Amy.
I'm like, that's all, moving on. Oh, and Tony offered to pay for Shane to go, so that's gonna be fun.
He was great.
Just now?
Yes, you're both going first day.
We're gonna get a bus.
No, I told you I would take you to, I got room for 6 other people, so whoever calls the spot, we can carpool.
I can take the minivan, you know.
See, we got it all, we've got it covered, so if you need a ride, it'll be fun. All right, so was it last Wednesday that we went over some of the economic slides, and we kept the real estate slides for today, just to kind of talk about where we're at, where we're going. And this is a really fun discussion. So we can look at these numbers, but I want us to talk about what you're feeling in your business and where you think it's going and why these things are happening. Because that's how you should be talking with your clients, right? So if you use these numbers, it's not just, hey, look at the numbers. It's how do we speak around the numbers, and how does that affect buyers and sellers, and how does it affect your business, quite honestly? I think it was Chris that we talked about, he brought to the point of, we are not, as a market center, we're not going with the market right now. We are outpacing the market in many areas, right? So that's a huge thing to say to people, because a lot of people are like, well, the market's going here, or the market's going there. We're not. We're actually outpacing it by quite a bit. And yesterday, I think any agent that could get on, what is it, Keeping Real Trends or whatever, keeping it current. Yes, every agent that follows that site posted something about price points. Did anybody see this on social media? That the price points in the year of the election were at a certain price point, and the year after the election, every single year, the price went up. The average home price went up after an election. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, people are waiting for the election because prices are going to go down. The only year that happened was 2008 and 2009. The only year that it actually went down lightly. The only one. Otherwise, for the last, I don't know, I think it was like 8 elections, it has went up. The price point went up the year after. It's a really good thing to talk about with people, because how many people are saying that? They're like, oh, we're going to wait till after the election. Do they know why? No, they have no idea why, because that just sounds like a really good thing to say, right? It's like another objection that they have no idea why they're saying it. So arm yourself with some of these stats so that you can say, okay, I'm curious. Why would you want to do that? Well, the prices are gonna go down. Oh man, I have this really interesting statistic. Do you want to see it? And then they're gonna be like, I'm wrong. So unless Obama gets elected again, because that was the year that he got elected, that was the only time it went down, just FYI. But- And it was the first year. You what?
It was the economy, not the man, but.
No, that was the only year. Like, it had nothing to do with him. I'm saying, it had nothing to do with either side,
Not a
right?
political statement.
No, it wasn't a political statement.
For the first time homebuyer credit.
No, no. Anyways, sides per agent, how do we feel about this?
Per year?
This is the average.
So this is saying 5.6 sides per agent.
Correct.
The average agent did 5.5 deals.
Remember last week we talked about, I think it was Ben or Alex, that was freaked out about how many transactions were actually available for real estate agents? Wasn't it him? Was it, I think it was, he was like, what? There's only that many? And we were all talking about what the average.
I think it was 88,000 or that's what the number.
Yeah, he was like, that doesn't sound like that many. But the average is actually only 5.3 last year per agent.
I,
Definitely.
I think one of the crazy things is if you go back to like 2008 when everything went bad, right? They still had more units per agent back then. This is the lowest we've been in that timeline.
How many agents are there?
Well, this calculates it though, doesn't it?
580.
In our, yes, currently. But what does that mean? So there's more agents, right? It's not that there is less real estate people. There's more agents. And there's more agents that are not getting the business, right? So when we're talking about our market center outpacing, that just means that the more and more we get market share, we're gonna crush this average, right? Because this is nationally. And this is year over year. Because there's some people that are in it part-time, there's some people that don't do a ton of transactions, there's some people that are in it for 2 years and never do a transaction. There's people that don't do transactions for years, right? So that obviously drives that down a little bit. They wait for maybe a personal transaction or they're doing investment transactions. How do you think this is gonna shift in the next few years? What do you say? Oh, absolutely, there's gonna be less agents.
We'll go up then.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of closings has been down 20-30% over the last 2 years too. So I think if that number goes up, plus there's less agents, I think that's gonna shoot through.
In a bad way. You know how there's less agents? We take more business. And more agents have to get out of business. Honestly, right? Like, we take more. They have less. That's how it works. All right, next slide. So this is volume per agent. That's interesting. What's the difference here? Remember when I said people's numbers are up? This is what we're looking at. We're looking at volume a lot of times, and even, I mean, we can even say this for GCI. What, it's been the last 4 months, our GCI has been record breaking. That has not been necessarily because of units and the record breaking units, right? Like, we have not just crushed the unit goal. It's volume, right? Prices are going up and up and up and up. However, let's say that switches. what you have to be really prepared for is getting more units at that point in time, right? Because what directly relates to what you get paid? Is it units or is it volume? Volume, right? So I just want us to be really careful when we just look at volume. Because that's truly determined by the market. Yes, you can increase it by different people you know, associate with, and maybe you can go into the luxury market versus, you know, not being in the luxury market, but it truly is going to shift depending on the market. Every time.
Next slide.
Okay, so I think we talked about this one last time too. So 76% of mortgages have rates of 5% or less. That is a crazy statistic. So this is why when we were talking about interest rates, right? And it's like, at what rate would you do business with me? Why do you think 5 is the number or 6 is the number? Because the majority of people are at that right now. So does anybody ever really want to go up? No. What do people talk about? Oh, my interest rate, I'm at, 4 point whatever. I'm at 5 point whatever, right? So this is where this is coming from. What else does that say though? On an economic level.
You're borrowing money really, at a really low rate.
You're borrowing at a really, really low rate. So who gets that money when it's like the interest? Who's getting that money? The banks. So later in this slide, there's going to be a conversation about what's going to happen with some of these banks, right? So they're not making a ton in theory, when we used to have rates at 6 to 8% and commercial rates were even higher than that, right? Their profits aren't as high. And if things shift with the market, there's a scenario in here that the banks could end up having a real financial issue. Why? Because that's happening. Like, do we look at it as a whole like that? Like, it's really fun to borrow money at like 4%, right? I mean, it's pretty free, but what does that mean for the rest of the economy?
This means they're gonna print more and the government will bail them out.
This is not a political class. Right, but it is true, right? Like, that's where, like, we have to understand how these things work, right? Like, we can capitalize or, at a certain interest rate or at a certain price point. What does it mean as a whole? Because it does affect everything over time. Everyone is staring at me like, what are you talking about?
I think one of the things that we have to remember about this is most people didn't buy a house simply because, oh, it's a good rate, I'm gonna buy a house. There was a reason to buy a house and then there was a good rate to go with it. And so there's still that reason.
It's not even the rate though. It was honestly a payment, right?
Right. It was, yeah, but whatever that was, but there's still that reason people move for various reasons and the rate is just part of that, right? My payment is part of that. So although 76% of mortgages have 5% less, which means they would go up, the need of, hey, I got a different job or someone died or a divorce or all these different life change spots are the reason most people move anyway.
Well, the other piece is, does anyone follow when tax rates go up for property taxes? Does anyone follow this, honestly, on a regular basis? I have talked to so many people that are talking about property tax rates, and they want to get out of a certain area because it's going up to go to another area. That is a bigger conversation than this even. And if you don't know what that looks like between different areas, I highly recommend you doing that. Also that they can contest that. I live in Minneapolis, and that is like my biggest connection piece with people that have the property tax come to them. They're like, it just went up by XYZ. You know what? That gives you the opportunity to say, here's some comps. Here, go try to contest this, right? And all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's really valuable, and their taxes go down by whatever amount, right? So that's something to have a conversation with people about, even more than sometimes interest rates, because that can be a whole
We could just-
another payment.
we could
You are on today, Shane. You are on. Rare form.
Yeah. I have a lot of people who want to move out of Hennepin County. We had Sherry and I had a meeting with our lender that we've worked with for 15 or 20 years at Bell, and Bell had a meeting last week. And what came up at their big meeting with the bank last week is that they said that what they're anticipating is the gap just needs to close a little bit more. So in other words, right now, people who are, and we're not gonna worry about, and we probably shouldn't be concerned too much about the people that are at 3%, because they're not gonna move, right? Unless there's a life circumstance that forces them to. But there's a lot of percentage above that, 35 plus 14, 10 and 19, a huge percentage above that, that once these rates drop enough to be close enough within 1.5 or 2 points of where people are, they're likely not going to be as stressed out about the significant difference in interest rate, and they're going to start moving. Am I making sense?
Mhm.
So we're closing the gap. As the rates start to come down, there's people in these, 10% of the people in 5 to 6, they'll move right now. 6% plus 14, they'll move right now. 4 to 5, that 20%, they'll move when it gets down to, high 5s, mid 6s. Right? Because the gap's not that different. And then it's really not gonna be much. They're gonna be like, it's not that big of a deal to us. It's the fact that it's between 3 and 7 is
Yeah.
the biggest problem.
The other thing I've heard is that consumer debt has really, really escalated since 2020. And so that actually, when they're paying 18 to 27% on consumer debt, 6% on your mortgage looks really sweet. So they can sell the home they're in, pay off their debt and have a new mortgage at 6%. That's considerably less than what they're paying now with their consumer debt.
Yeah, I mean, credit card debt, if you've looked at it lately, is insane. Like, and I think it's one where, people were paying it off, and then all of a sudden it hit this level where it's like, now I'm only paying the monthly amount, or they're not paying it all, right? And there's different penalties that are happening. Fair point. All right, so this is also an interesting little fun fact. So this is where homeowners, like how many have equity, how many own them outright? Who do you think that 38% that own it outright are? And that is a large proportion of the society, right? And what's the trend with that right now? They're either staying in their houses, right? Because it's like one level living, a lot of them bought Ramblers and it all makes sense, right? Or they're downsizing, right? And they're going to different communities where they don't have to deal with maintenance.
They're selling and just going down south.
Or that too. You're like, or this is happening.
Find a referral partner.
Yeah.
So what about the 38% right there with 50% equity? I mean, when you think of those two things put together, that's a large amount of people that have a ton of equity in their house. My mind goes to, do any of these people want to use their equity to invest? That's where my mind goes, right? Like, what could they be doing with their money instead of them just having it sit there? People have grandkids, people have kids. Like, there are so many opportunities there to have conversations that are incredibly valuable to make them lifelong clients, right? And then you have the 24%, which is less than 50%, which is a really small proportion of homeowners having less than 50% equity. Would you guys, I mean, are you shocked at these numbers? Derek says no.
Just because I'm not shocked by it,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I've heard it too many times. But if you just think about the way property values have shot up in the last 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
like there should be an awful lot of equity out there. if they own a house.
I also think about the people that have only owned one house for their whole life, right? How many of us know like other generations that have moved like 4 times? 3 times, 2 times. I know a lot of people, it's like their first, oh, this is their first home. But they're gonna sell again in 5 years and then they upsize. That was not the plan for most people when they bought their house, right? If they bought their house and they've stayed in it for a really long time.
In Minnesota. Sure. I
Yeah.
mean, in the Navy, I moved and that was not normal, but in Minnesota, when we came here. I
Maybe it's a
was shocked
Midwest
at the
thing, because
number of
Wisconsin's the same way. Yeah. Like I never thought of ever having a different house or like moving, and either, like, I just never, that wasn't an option. So, interesting. All right. We talked about that. Okay, I think, did we go
I'm
over
in
this?
my 6th home.
Put this one back in, because then the scenarios are next, yeah.
Okay, so I was talking about the scenarios with the, what was that?
I'm in my 6th home.
Was that, for what reason did you move?
I moved for business.
Okay.
So I started out in Washington DC. And I have to think about this. Washington to Atlanta to Washington to St. Louis to Pittsburgh. So we're Steelers fans. To Atlanta here.
We'll forgive you. Okay. So I mean, there is still relocation, right? But a lot of people stay where they're at.
Say on average, people move every 7.2 years.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the recession probability. This is what we were talking about with these next like 3 scenarios, right? Because I think we all are like, ooh, what's the crystal ball say? Our interest rate's gonna go down, our price is gonna go up, vice versa. What's gonna happen? I thought these next slides are incredibly valuable to show clients at some point in time. Again, we don't know necessarily, but if you show this chart, right? And when do we know that a recession's happening? We're already in it, right? It's not like you can be like, oh, it's gonna happen next month. Like you don't know that. You don't have any idea. It's you're in it and then you know the recession's happening. Next slide. Okay, so here's the scenario 1 and no recession happens, right? So unemployment's below 5%, interest rates fall to 6%, home sales are 4.5 million. This is the one where I think Gary was like, it's probably between 1 and 2, right? Like what's gonna really happen. It's defined by a resilient labor market, which allows rates to be increased before a recession sets in. The decline in rates will result in more home sales, but the recovery will be slow in housing as rates take time to come down. Is this what we're feeling right now?
The only thing I would add to this is during Mega Camp, Gary said, make no doubt, housing across America is in a recession. Like,
Housing, yes, but like
Right.
economically.
Yes,
like,
right.
Housing is ahead of the rest of the economy.
Right.
What do you guys think of this one? Think that's what's gonna happen? Raise your hand. Nobody has hands? Cool. Scenario 2.
No one thinks it's gonna happen.
A normal recession, right? So unemployment, 6 to 8%. Do we remember what the unemployment was?
0.4, isn't it?
It's low. I mean, it's really low right now. So it goes 6 to 8%, which would honestly, I think it's almost double than at that point from where we are right now. Rates fall rapidly between 5 and 6%, and then the home sales are 5 million. Historically falling home sales lead us into recessions, and rising sales lead us out. After 3 years of decline, the transition into a recession would trigger a more aggressive drop in rates from the Federal Reserve and stimulate the housing market to drive the growth of an economy. Guys, when I read that out loud, right, this is not like, there is a science to this. There's reasons why these things happen, right? It's to make the economy healthy again or stable, correct? So this is where I think the conversations with people are really, really important. We're not going to have really low rates and really low home prices. That's not gonna happen. That's not the way it's gonna work, right? So I think that's what people, they're like, oh, I have a really low rate. Well, something else has to happen in that situation. And usually it's gonna be price points go up, right? So be able to talk about that with people and actually get to their motivation. Where is it really the price point of the house? Is it the interest rate? Or what is it that's gonna make them make a move? Again, it's going to be the payment, right? Be able to speak on this each time. All right, then, this was the third one that I was talking about before, which is a banking recession. So unemployment is 8 to 10%, interest rates fall back down to 3 to 4. Home sales are 4 million or less. In this scenario, something damages the banking system, creating a shock to lending. Home prices and home sales will fall despite low mortgage rates, and it happened in the Great Recession, savings and loan prices. This piece, in my opinion, would be more of a commercial side, right? So if some of the commercial loans, things happen with that, that's a big deal, right? Because if you guys follow residential loans versus commercial loans, those are a totally different ballgame. And right now there's some, I mean, well, you probably follow this. There's some things happening in the commercial world that isn't perfect right now in regards to defaults and people trying to unload things. Am I right on that?
Yes.
So when you think that those also are separate from each other, they're not, right? Because it all is affected by the banking industry as well. And obviously in the commercial world, there are businesses that own those commercial buildings. And there are businesses that have employees, which then affects the residential world.
A big chunk has been office. Whenever people decided they were forced to work from home.
But we're also seeing things in shopping, right? Like in retail, like retail is shifting big time. I mean, I think Southdale Mall, right, was like the oldest indoor mall that was ever built. And you go into that thing and there's like 6 stores open at a time. And they're trying to revamp it by putting things like Kowalski's in there. But I'm like, things are shifting. They're shifting big time because you've got everything online. You don't need to go in. You can now drop off your returns at Whole Foods. Like things are ebbing and flowing there and they have to be repurposed, right? Like those buildings can't just sit empty or something will happen at that point in time.
The thing I remember most about this slide was, Gary said, like, where rates are 5%. He said, oh, we'll never get back to the 3s in this lifetime. And if we do, it's not a good thing. And this is the part where it's not a good thing. Rates will come down to 3 or 4%, but that's only because there will be economic challenges in the other spot, right? This is such a disaster that the only way we can find our way out of it as a country is to make money so cheap that people will start borrowing to spend again. And so this is, if we see rates going to the 3% again, that's the cautionary tale of, hey, what's really going on with the market? Yeah,
There's
and
always
so.
an effect, right? There's always an effect of something that's really, really good when it comes to money. I mean, even when we think of, I mean, Shane mentioned this before, right? Like the home buyer credits that used to happen, right? That was to be able to get people back into the market and then prices went up, right? Because people could actually purchase and it became more and more multiple offer type situations and it just kind of made the market healthy again. You what?
And then they took the home buyer credit away and values went down more.
3 times the value of the home buyer credit.
It's the effect of everything, right? And I would caution us because it's some of that's happening again right now, right? So we have down payment that's happening for first generation buyers or first time home buyers or whatever it is, right? Watch where prices go and what that does with the market. Like it's a huge positive for a lot of people and there is an effect to it and we're going to see it. We're going to see it in the market at some point in time. Anything else on these 3 scenarios? Now that you've seen all 3 of them, if you had to vote, Heather, which one would you vote for? I mean, what do you really think is going to happen? Okay. I mean, number one would be the most stable, right? Like that would be the most stable for everybody. The buyers, the sellers, real estate agents, the economy.
I would just go back one slide though. Because if you look at where those gray bars are, those are recession follows projection, recession follows projection. If we're projecting that high, I would imagine the probability of no recession pretty low.
And a recession can be a smaller period of time. Like when you think of like, I mean, that's a pretty large gap of time, right?
Defined as 3 consecutive quarters of declining GDP.
Whereas, I mean, it was like a little blip.
Yeah, because we had the COVID recession. That's that very thin line there at the end.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, boom, it took off again.
But the other part is, I mean, things happen in cycles, right? It has been a little bit of time since there's been a larger or a recession that's hit, right? Besides COVID, which was kind of
This is a pretend one.
a different situation, right? But I'm like, if I was to bet, it's gonna happen. Right? Okay, next.
Look at those 3 scenarios though, real quick, just 1, 2, 3. You're in an industry that actually isn't affected as much by the recession as any other. 4 to 5 to more million houses are selling during any one of those scenarios. So your business, you're in one industry that we can get through this real easy.
You can get through it really easy, and the one thing to focus on again is sell more units. Right? Sell more units, focus on the units portion of it. Next. Oh, that's it. Any thoughts around those numbers? How are you gonna utilize them is what I wanna know. 2 people wanna share?
Conversations. Educating them.
Okay. What else? Who else? Really quiet.
Sharing them on social.
Okay, how are you gonna share them on social?
Well, here. I can choose just 2 of them.
Okay. Well, I think it's conversation starters, right? Because it's like getting the conversation started in some way. So when you think that, how do you create people to either comment or reach out or kind of think about what you're writing?
I loved your thought on knowing that, 50% plus have so much equity in their home, to give them, when you're making the call, have you considered using some of your equity to invest in something else? Right? I'm not planning to move, but it's probably not good to use that to go buy a car or something, but if you're investing that in a different spot, is there, just a different conversation to have with clients. I thought that was good.
I think Kevin, you knew this, like when I first got into the business, it was one where, I didn't ever follow the stock market. I never like invested in the stock market. I didn't know nothing really great about it besides, Tony telling me to, buy some things that I follow on River all the time. And really, I just get excited about my $250 that I put in there. And I was like, oh, it went up by 50. Oh, it went down by 50. Oh, it went up again. And it really gives me heartburn, actually. Whereas like with really,
More money and then
yeah, I don't want to because I don't trust it. Okay, that's why. But for me, I stick with what I know, right? And I know that if you hold on to real estate, so many people are like, oh, I don't ever win with real estate. Oh, I've always lost. And I'm like, tell me more about that piece. How did you lose in real estate? They sold because they had to, right? So they invested and then they got in a pinch and they overspent on something, they sold and then they lost. Where every time I've ever bought, and you probably have the same, I have multiple scenarios. Like, can you flip it? Can you rent it? Can you do an addition on it? When the 2040 plan came, I'm like, can I demo this entire thing and build an apartment building? Yeah, I can. There's multiple different things that I can do with this one plat of land. that I will never feel like I'm stuck depending on what the market is. And can I hold it? Right? And I talk to so many people right now that are like, oh, I lost money in this. Oh, I lost money in this. And the conversation was like, hey, I just had this new grandbaby. Like, awesome. Have you ever thought about just buying a duplex for that grandbaby? You rent it out and someday they can own it and they can do whatever they want with it. They can have an income generating property, right? Or that can be what you put in a trust that's already been paid for by somebody else. And they're like, I never thought about that. Like, how safe is that? And like for my kids, like Reese wants to go buy a place that she can rent out to her friends. I think Jordan did this actually, like to her friends in college, right? She's like already on that plan, which I'm like, ooh, if you go to Boulder, honey, you're gonna have to figure that out on your own. But like that's really what you can have those conversations with if they have that much equity. Like, because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know, right? And it's just sitting there doing nothing. What else? How many of you have an investment property? How many of you have quite a bit of equity, and you don't have to answer this, equity in your house, and you're like, ooh, maybe I should do that. I always thought that I was like, when I was selling more often, if I couldn't tell them about a rental property on what were the pros and cons, and if I would buy it myself, why would I tell them that it's a good investment? I mean, there were times where I'm like, I'd rather buy that for me than the client, right? Obviously, they're my client, so I have to give them that. But if they ask me, would you buy this? And I can say, if you don't buy this, I would. Do you think that validates what you know and what you know about that property? Absolutely, it does. And you will never know more about the market until you put your money in it in that aspect. You just won't. You're on a whole bunch of auto searches, I bet, and you're following things for people, but when it's your money and that auto search comes up and a new home is on the market and yours is going to be up in the next 3 months because you're flipping it, you know everything about that particular neighborhood. Any investors, am I right on that? You know more about that market. You know every house that's going to go up for sale. You're going to know which ones are, you know, someone's moving out in the next 2 months. You know more when your money's in it, by far.
I think that's true for all our clients too. Like when they're looking, they know more about what's happening in those neighborhoods than.
Because they're invested, like they're emotionally invested and that's where their money's gonna go. And can you really say like, hey, I am the expert in this area? Most of the time, what do? They're like, I wanna go see these houses and it's 2 days before and you're like, ooh, I gotta do a CMA on that place. Like, I gotta figure out what's on the market. I gotta figure out what's going on here, right? When they're looking at that every single day. Or have you ever had the client that's like, oh, I saw that this person had a garage sale this weekend. Do you know anything about them moving? And you're like, I have no idea. They know a lot more than you do because they're circling that neighborhood like vultures. I mean, I used to do that. Like, people were moving out like beds and I was like, you selling? They're like, no, we're just moving my kid to college. Are you thinking about selling? Because now she's at college. They turned into a client, by the way. All right, let's do wants and needs. What do we got?
Julie, I have a property. It will go live first or second week of October. I've shared this before. It's in Medina, 5 acres, 5-bedroom, 4-bath, swimming pool, Orono School District, 5 garages, 3 attached, 1.875.
Awesome.
Okay. I know. Oh, on Homestead. I'll look.
What else?
We got a Rambler in Plymouth, it's going on for $550. It's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, right off of 6 and 101. Pond in the backyard, very private. Wooded lot.
2,600 square feet.
I have photos too that I can share if anybody's
Any
interested.
other buyers, listings? Are we tired or did we really just not want to talk today?
I need a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage,
close by Jordan. 250 max.
I have another one. I'm looking for something, it has to be in the Orono School District on the bus line. Minimum 5,000 square feet. And minimum 2 acres. And somewhere around 2 million.
Didn't you just say you had a listing for one by?
Try that already.
I know.
What else? All right, any open houses for anybody that you need help with? Anybody want to do open houses in the next 2 weeks? Raise your hand. So anyone that's looking for open houses, there's people, I know that's a lie, Tony. But there are a lot of agents that want to do open houses, and I know that there are plenty of people that look for it last minute. So if you can get those open houses scheduled on your listings on Monday, let us know so we can try to match make that, and they can go and door knock and get the right marketing so we can get as many buyers in as possible. Wants and needs, send to Lydia. She'll get out an email later this afternoon. What time do you usually want that by so there doesn't have to be 2 emails?
Like 2 o'clock.
So if you can get those to Lydia by 2 o'clock, then she could put them all in one. Cause I know you're probably like me, I look through only a few emails and then all of a sudden I just kind of space out. So 2 o'clock and she can get those out later this afternoon. All right, have a good one. Thank you.